I'm an oral history intern this semester at the Texas After Violence Project. I have been working on transcribing, editing, proofreading, creating digital archives and content for the story of Keith Brooks, who was the son of the first man to be executed by the state of Texas through lethal injection in 1982. The Keith Brooks story was especially personal to me and especially valuable to me because he grew up in Fort Worth, which is where I grew up as well. And he spoke about a lot of the neighborhoods and a lot of the institutions in the city and a lot of just place names that I was very familiar with. He actually mentioned my high school within his interview, in his transcript, which was interesting because the way that he mentioned it, he said that it was one of the white schools when he was talking about desegregation of Fort Worth ISD in 1974.
In 1974, I was in the 4th grade, and they desegregated. And so my 5th grade year, they sent us all the way to the other side of Fort Worth to go to an all-white school. They took about 14 of us to a small school. It was only about 300 kids at the school. But they took 14 of us from our neighborhood, and they sent us out there. There were 3 blacks in my class. I was one of 3 in that school there with all white kids. And in the 8th grade, Derek had went to a technical school, which is Trimble Technical High School. So we didn't go to our home school. I was set to go to an all-white school, which was either Southwest or Pasco, which are now even probably predominantly white schools. But I went to a minority school, which was a trade school because I followed Derek. And so we went to Tech High School, and I was in 9th grade at Tech when my father was executed.
You know, we sort of share like this community history, and just hearing him talk about the history of this community that I grew up in, and some of the things that I never really paid attention to. I mean, growing up, I'd always known about, and I've always been very interested in the history of the civil rights movement, the history of desegregation, the history of the black community in the South, something that I feel very strongly about, something that I've studied and re-examined in various parts of my life. But really hearing it from a perspective of Fort Worth, of Morningside neighborhood in Fort Worth, of Southwest High School in Fort Worth, that's something that was very, very personal to me. It took me by surprise, and then I almost went through a level of shame or guilt that I hadn't been aware that, yes, my high school at one point was a segregated school. That black people were not allowed to go to my high school at one point, which is something that, you know, through the 4 years that I spent there, never really crossed my mind. But hearing Keith Brooks' story, having him speak about places in a completely different way, places that I grew up in, institutions that I'm very familiar with, in schools, in municipal buildings, whatever it might be, hearing him speak about those places in a completely different perspective and in a completely different way than I would have spoken about them based on my experience, sort of opened my eyes to the fact that, in a way, coming from where I come from, I am sort of impacted by this history of violence within my city and this history of the death penalty within my city. And it sort of points to the idea that all of us as Texans, all of us as Americans, and all of us as people are connected to this narrative of the death penalty and connected to this narrative of violence and connected to this narrative of America as a place that has a history that we may want to ignore and we may want to distance ourselves from in a way, but something that, you know, its progress will never be made unless we confront our history as a community.